When Sarah heard her younger sister's laugh echoing from behind the door, the ballroom was full of the sound of the guests clinking their silver cutlery against the crystal glasses, waiting for the groom to kiss the bride under the floral arch. She stood paralyzed near the restrooms. The voices came from the half-open door of the service hallway. A sliver of light trembled in the crack. God, she's as naive as a child. 3 years, and she never realized that I was your lover. Chloe let out a soft laugh, but there was so much triumph in that little giggle that Sarah felt like she was listening to a stranger, not her sister. Not a single scream escaped her lips. Her designer bag didn't drop from her hands. Only her fingers moved, acting on pure instinct to find her phone. The screen lit up, reflecting against the elegant marble tiles. Sarah hit record. Behind the wall, Carter replied, "Keep your voice down. People are walking by." His voice was unrecognizable. Gone was the soft, loving tone he had used in his toast half an hour earlier when he promised to protect and love Sarah. Now his words dripped with irritation, as if his bride annoyed him even when she wasn't in the room. "You're scared," Chloe mocked. "It's way too late for that. We already signed the marriage license. We just have to survive this circus, and then I can finally keep what I've been enduring her sweet little smiles for." Sarah had stepped away from the reception for just a few minutes. The heavy scent of the lilies and the blinding camera flashes had made her feel suffocated. Now the celebration felt millions of miles away. "You promised to handle the paperwork right after the ceremony," Chloe hissed. "Don't drag this out. Mom will convince her. She'll tell her that a wife should trust her husband." "I remember," Carter said. "But Arthur Vance is no idiot. He was her father's old business partner, not some mall cop. Her mother will apply the pressure and Sarah will sign. First, the power of attorney, then the voting shares on the board, and finally mortgaging the townhouse for our joint venture. You came up with it yourself." Sarah leaned her shoulder against the cold wall. Her mind was completely blank, except for a few isolated words echoing in her head. Power of attorney, shares, townhouse, mom. "And what if she doesn't sign?" Carter asked from behind the door. Chloe scoffed. "She'll sign. She always tries to be the perfect proper one. Her dear dad turned her into the golden child, and Mom turned her into the guilty older sister who owes me something. It's a very convenient combination." A single tear slid down Sarah's cheek. She wiped it away with the back of her hand. The agonizing pain seemed to step aside, making way for a terrifying crystalline lucidity. Chloe's voice grew bolder. "For 3 years, I've had to listen to you call her tender and special. And then you come to my bed and confess that sleeping next to her puts you to sleep out of sheer boredom. Stop playing the decent groom. I'm not doing this for fun. You know it's for the money." The pause was brief. Then Carter said something that couldn't be justified as a blind fit of rage. "Her trust fund isn't going to magically transfer to me. I'm not an idiot. But if she manages to get me into the business, gives me access, and puts her capital into a joint project, everything changes. I can survive a divorce after that. The important thing is not to scare her now." Sarah looked at the mirror across the hall. The bride staring back at her had turned into a stranger in a matter of seconds. With every sentence spoken behind that door, her gaze grew calmer. From the ballroom, the DJ's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, in just a few moments, we invite you to direct your attention to the screens for a beautiful video chronicling Sarah and Carter's love story." The guests erupted into applause. Chloe laughed again. "How cute, a love story. I hope there's no footage of you sneaking out of my apartment." "Shut up," Carter snapped. "Pull yourself together. Run back to your sister. Tell her whatever she wants to hear. We can't afford a scene right now. I just want to get this farce over with." Sarah let out a nearly imperceptible exhale. The recording was still running, capturing the collapse of the illusion she had carefully guarded for 3 years. "Mom will take my side anyway," Chloe said, softening her tone. "She always chooses me. She pities me because my dad was a deadbeat who drank himself to death, while I had to grow up in the shadow of your rich princess. Don't call Sarah a princess in front of people. In public, I call her my sweet girl. Then keep doing it, and after the divorce, you marry me. You promised. First, we have to get what we started all this for." "You're my favorite bastard, Carter. Did you think we were in this for romance? No, this is about justice. She's always had everything. I only had Mom's complaints, and my drunk dad passed out on the couch. Now it's my turn." Sarah was no longer crying. If she threw the door open right then, they would start lying, and her mother would recite her usual mantra. "Be the mature one, Sarah." No, she wouldn't let them hide. When the voices faded, Sarah saved the audio file, touched up her lipstick with a tissue, and smiled. The smile wasn't bridal, but it was genuine. A minute later, Chloe stepped out of the service hallway. Seeing Sarah, she froze for a fraction of a second, but immediately stretched her lips into a tender, sisterly smile. "Sarah, there you are. Everyone is looking for you. You've been crying tears of joy." Chloe tilted her head, trying to gauge her sister's expression, but Sarah had already walked past her. Carter appeared seconds later. His eyes immediately locked onto the phone in Sarah's hand. "Honey, where have you been? Is everything okay?" Sarah looked at him. Her gaze was so hauntingly serene that he was the first to look away. "Tonight, a lot of things have become perfectly clear." He frowned, but a waiter walked by, and the groom decided not to ask unnecessary questions. Sarah led the way back to the ballroom. Inside, she was trembling, but on the outside, she held herself together for the moment that had to happen in front of witnesses. The country club ballroom was packed with family, college friends, coworkers, and business partners of her late father. Nancy, her mother, was adjusting Chloe's bracelet. Martha Davis, an old family friend, immediately noticed Sarah's face. "What's wrong?" Emily, Sarah's best friend and maid of honor, whispered, "If I falter, don't let me stop." Emily's smile vanished. The DJ announced the Love Story video. A title card with their names appeared on the giant screens. Carter tried to take Sarah's hand. She carefully slipped her fingers out of his grip and stood up. "Excuse me," Sarah said, taking the microphone from the DJ. "Before the video, is there something else I'd like to share with our guests?" A wave of intrigued murmurs rippled through the room. Nancy smiled weakly, while Chloe slowly set her champagne glass on the table. "Dylan, please connect my phone to the sound system. I need to play an audio file. Turn the volume all the way up." The DJ looked confused. "Maybe after the montage?" Now Carter stood up. "Sarah, what's going on?" She didn't look at him. "Sit down, please. The guests will find this very informative." The room fell completely silent. Dylan plugged in the auxiliary cable. A dark rectangle with a moving audio waveform appeared on the screens. The first sentence echoed through the massive speakers, shockingly loud. "God, she's as naive as a child. 3 years, and she never realized that I was your lover." An absolute, suffocating silence dropped instantly. Chloe jumped up, bumping into the table. Nancy opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Carter took a step toward the DJ booth. "Turn that off," he barked at Dylan. "Don't you even think about it," Martha Davis said sharply. Arthur Vance. Sarah's father's old partner stood up and physically blocked Carter from reaching the soundboard. "Let the recording play. If it's a lie, you can explain it afterward." The audio continued. 200 guests listened to the groom and the maid of honor talk about powers of attorney, voting shares, leveraging real estate, a planned divorce, and their future marriage. The words methodically ripped their masks off. Linda Preston, the groom's mother, turned a deep shade of red. "This is a scandal at her own wedding," she hissed. Chloe ran to her mother. "Mom, it's an AI fake. She edited it. She's always hated me." Nancy stared at the screen, even though there were no faces, just the pulsing white line of the audio wave. Then came the snippet where her youngest daughter said, "Mom will take my side anyway. She always chooses me," followed by the cruel words about pity, convenience, and blindness. Nancy seemed to age a decade in a single minute. She shifted her gaze to her youngest daughter. "Chloe, is that you?" "Mom, don't listen to it. She did this on purpose." "It's your voice." Chloe fell silent. Carter tried to seize control of the narrative. "Sarah, you are making a massive mistake right now. We can talk about this in private. Everyone is exhausted. People have been drinking. Who knows what was said on that recording?" His own voice interrupted him. "Her trust fund isn't going to magically transfer to me. I'm not an idiot." Someone in the crowd let out a gasp. Emily covered her mouth with her hand, then quickly lowered it, moving closer to her best friend. The bride held the microphone with both hands. The truth had to run its course. The recording ended with Chloe's declaration, "Now it's my turn." The audio wave flatlined for several seconds. No one breathed. Even the DJ was nervously crumpling his cue cards. Linda Preston was the first to snap out of the shock. "This is a private family matter. You had no right to humiliate people in front of high society." Martha let out a bitter laugh. The humiliation didn't start on that screen. Robert Preston Carter's father stood up. His face was shadowed with fury. "Sarah, do you realize you are destroying my son's life? Your son came for mine. I just turned up the volume." Nancy remained frozen in her chair. Chloe was sobbing loudly, but her tears were fueled by rage, not remorse. Carter stepped dangerously close to Sarah. "Give me the phone." Emily immediately stepped between them. "Back off. I'm talking to my wife." Sarah raised a hand to stop her friend and held Carter's gaze. "You have no right to call me that after what everyone just heard." "Yes, I do. We signed the license." He said it quietly, just for her. Those words carried a warning. There was no love, no shame, no plea for forgiveness. His calculation was clinging desperately to its last thread. The legal seal, the documents, the status of a husband. Sarah understood that the night wasn't ending with an exposure. It was the beginning of a war. She turned to the guests. "I want to thank everyone who came today to share what was supposed to be the most important day of my life. Instead of a celebration, you've witnessed the truth. It hurts, but I am profoundly grateful to have heard it before signing a single document regarding my house, my father's company, or my future." Nancy flinched at the mention of the documents. Chloe wiped her face with a napkin and hissed, "You always wanted to drag me through the mud, didn't you?" Sarah didn't even acknowledge her. She took off her diamond ring and left it on the edge of the table next to an untouched glass of champagne. "Carter, my lawyer will contact you tomorrow. I am filing for an annulment, not a divorce, so you can't play the victim as a husband and ask for alimony." Annulment. "Because you entered this contract through outrageous fraud." Whispers erupted all over the room. The word court hadn't been spoken, but everyone knew exactly where the night was heading. Carter smiled with disdain, completely shedding the last traces of the charming groom. "You think it's that simple? I'm not agreeing to anything. We are legally married. We'll see how you prove your hysterical little theories in a courtroom." Emily tightly gripped Sarah's arm. Martha Davis stepped up beside them, ready to act as a human shield. Arthur Vance was already quietly instructing the club manager to secure the security camera footage. Nancy stood up, her face ashen and her lips trembling. Sarah, the eldest daughter, looked at her mother. In that single glance, there were years of history, caving to Chloe's tantrums, stepping aside to accommodate someone else's pity, placing guilt above justice. "Not now, Mom." Nancy stopped, as if those words had slammed a door in her face. Sarah handed the microphone back to the DJ. The tech leaned toward her and whispered, "If you need it, I'll testify that you only gave me the file tonight." "Thank you," she said. Carter caught up to her near the heavy mahogany exit doors. "You're going to regret this." Sarah turned around. Behind him stood Chloe, stripped of her triumphant smile. The groom's mother was frantically telling anyone who would listen that the recording was an AI deepfake. His father was aggressively dialing his phone amidst scattered napkins and untouched filet mignons. "You've lost your mind," Sarah replied quietly. "Tonight is the first time in years I don't feel sorry for myself. Thank you for opening my eyes." She walked out of the country club with Emily. Boston's cold night air hit her, smelling of rain on hot asphalt. Her heavy Vera Wang dress made it hard to walk, and the veil caught on the door of the waiting black SUV. But Sarah didn't ask for help until Emily carefully gathered the tool. Before climbing in, she looked back at the illuminated windows of the ballroom. Inside remained the 5-tier cake, the gifts, the floral arch, the ring, and the people who just an hour ago had called her a happy bride. Her phone vibrated. A message from Carter lit up the screen. "Delete the recording or you'll regret it. I am your husband, Sarah." A judge is going to hear that too. She read the message, took a screenshot, and forwarded it to Emily. Then, she opened the saved audio file, synced it to the cloud, and dropped her phone into her purse. The SUV pulled away. Staring out the window, Sarah knew exactly what was coming. Tomorrow, Carter would deny everything. Chloe would lie. Her mother would search for words to fix the irreparable. But now, Sarah had the voice of truth and a resolve she would not abandon. The morning after the wedding began with the buzzing of a phone on an unfamiliar nightstand. Sarah opened her eyes in Emily's guest room, momentarily disoriented by the bookshelf above her instead of the vaulted ceiling of the penthouse where Carter had promised to carry her across the threshold. Then the memory crashed down on her all at once. The service hallway, Chloe's laugh, the recording, the giant screens, the ring next to the champagne glass. The phone vibrated again. Carter's name flashed on the screen, followed by a missed call from her mother, and then another from Chloe. Sarah silenced the device. Emily walked in with 2 mugs of coffee. "Just don't answer right now. They aren't calling to apologize. They're calling to break you." "I know." Sarah's voice was hoarse. She had spent the night sitting on Emily's kitchen floor in her wedding dress, while Emily stayed by her side in silence, protecting her friend's fragile composure. "Is the file safe?" Sarah asked, her tone hardening. "I have a copy. It's in your email, on your cloud, and on a flash drive. I also saved the screenshot of Carter's threat." Sarah picked up her phone. Carter's first messages were brief. "Answer me. You ruined everything." Then the tone shifted. "Sarah, I love you. Let's talk." Then came the threats. "I am your legal husband. I will sue you for defamation." The last one arrived at 3 a.m. "Delete everything before it's too late. I won't let you erase our marriage so easily." She took another screenshot. Her fingers were steady. "He doesn't want to let you go," Emily noted quietly. "He doesn't want me. He wants the status." During the sleepless hours, a terrifying realization had crystallized. Carter wasn't going to repent. He was going to cling to the marriage certificate, to the word husband, to the legal right to stand by her side and speak for her assets. If she simply filed a standard divorce petition, he would ask the court for a mandatory reconciliation period, play the part of the heartbroken man, and use that time to pressure her through her mother, her social circle, and her business partners. Emily had already reached out to Jessica Hayes, a tough, relentless corporate and family lawyer whom Sarah's late father had always trusted. Jessica listened to the brief summary over the phone, scheduled an emergency meeting for 10 a.m., and gave immediate instructions. Bring the original recording copies of the messages, the marriage license, your ID, and all documents related to your trust and real estate, Jessica ordered. Don't send anything to anyone yet. Don't get into arguments. Anything you reply via text will be used to paint you as the aggressive party. Sarah had mentioned that Carter texted her, saying the recording was illegal in that state. Let him write whatever he wants. We'll sort it out in the office. Golden rule: do not delete anything, and do not agree to a single in-person meeting without a witness. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. It was Nancy. Emily opened the door and instantly tensed up. Sarah's mother stood in the hallway in a dark trench coat, wearing no makeup, clutching a bag of Sarah's casual clothes. I need to talk to Sarah, Nancy said. That's her decision. Sarah stepped into the foyer. Come in, Mom. Nancy crossed the threshold. Her eyes lingered on the discarded wedding dress draped over an armchair. Honey, she said, Chloe said terrible things. Carter is to blame too, but the fact is, you signed the papers. You are married. You can hit pause, talk this through calmly, away from the public eye. Away from the public eye was exactly where they had been lying to her for 3 years. Nancy winced. Chloe was desperate. Do you know what her life has been like? Her father crushed her spirit, abandoned us, and drank himself to death. She always felt inferior next to you, and that's why she ended up sleeping with my fiancé. Nancy lowered her head. I'm not making excuses. If you're making excuses, you're just using different words. Nancy tightened her grip on the bag's handles. Carter came by the house last night. He said he loves you. He said Chloe twisted everything, that, yes, they had an affair, but he was going to end it after the wedding. Sarah picked up her phone and played the audio file from the halfway mark. The guest room filled with Chloe's voice. Mom will convince her. She'll tell her that a wife should trust her husband. Then Carter. The important thing is not to scare her now. Then her sister again. Mom will take my side anyway. She always chooses me. Nancy turned pale. Is that it? Did you edit those parts? Sarah asked coldly. Her mother sank into a dining chair. The bag dropped to the floor. I didn't know she thought that. I didn't want to know. They sat in silence for a few seconds. Then Nancy asked, stripped of her former maternal authority, What are you going to do? I'm filing for an annulment based on fraud. It's not just a divorce. I want it on the public record that he is a con artist. It will be a trial. Carter won't accept it. He'll fight it. On paper, he is your husband. Sarah offered a nearly imperceptible smile. And that is exactly why I can't afford to wait. Nancy looked at her eldest daughter with profound anxiety, though it seemed more rooted in a fear of scandal than in empathy. Chloe won't survive this if you take it all the way. And I was supposed to survive all of this in silence? Her mother had no answer. She left the bag of clothes by the door and said quietly, I don't know how to handle this anymore. Start by not repeating other people's lies. Nancy left. The door clicked shut softly. But to Sarah, Emily's apartment instantly felt wider and easier to breathe in. At noon, Sarah and Emily were sitting in Jessica Hayes' corner office in a downtown high-rise. The lawyer greeted Sarah without an ounce of pity, which immediately helped calm her nerves. Walk me through it in order, from the moment you left the ballroom, Jessica said. Sarah spoke for a long time. Emily chimed in regarding the backups, the witness texts, and the timeline. Then they played the full recording. The lawyer didn't interrupt once. When the audio ended, Jessica took off her reading glasses and set them on a legal pad. Here is the crucial reality. Infidelity, even on the wedding day, does not automatically make a marriage voidable in this state. Judges don't grant annulments just for broken hearts. I understand that, but they aren't just talking about an affair. They're talking about the core purpose of the marriage, manipulating my assets, coercing me through my mother accessing my father's holding company. Exactly, Jessica nodded. We have to prove that Carter entered the union with zero intention of fulfilling the marital contract and that the marriage was strictly a vehicle to defraud you. It's a high bar, yes, but it's possible, especially if we can establish a pattern of premeditation prior to the ceremony. Jessica listed the requirements: message logs about legal documents, drafts of powers of attorney, security footage from the club, and testimony from anyone Carter had questioned regarding her corporate shares or bank accounts. Sarah remembered a night a week before the wedding. Carter was sitting at her kitchen island with his MacBook, saying that as her husband, he wanted to take some of the administrative burden off her plate. He had offered to add himself as a signatory on her accounts. At the time, it had sounded like an act of devotion. "I have emails," Sarah said. "He sent me a list of legal to-dos. He kept writing, 'Honey, trust me. A husband needs to help protect your assets.' He attached a file titled Standard Power of Attorney Draft. I didn't even open it. I told him we'd look at it after the honeymoon." Jessica printed the first page of the draft from Sarah's forwarded email. As she read, her jaw tightened. These powers are incredibly broad. Way too broad for someone who just wants to help pay the bills. He was trying to get carte blanche over your trust. Sarah smiled for the first time that morning. Jessica formulated a battle plan. Step 1. Issue a formal cease and desist letter and a corporate notice to all partners at Sterling Enterprises stating that Carter Preston has no legal authority, power of representation, or any standing over Sarah or Richard Sterling's estate. Step 2. Subpoena the country club to preserve all security camera footage. Step 3. Secure sworn affidavits from D.J. Dillon and the club manager, Andrew Miller, regarding the timeline of the audio playback. Then we file the petition. Jessica said, "He's almost certainly going to drag this out. First, he'll say he loves you. Then he'll ask for a court-ordered reconciliation period. After that, he'll try to get the audio thrown out as an illegal recording. He'll play on your emotions and paint himself as the victim of a hysterical bride." He already started. Sarah showed her the 3 a.m. text. "Save it all," the lawyer instructed. "Sometimes, arrogance does my job infinitely better than a confession." Leaving the high-rise, Sarah held a thick legal folder. Emily offered to take her home, but Sarah shook her head. "The office first." "Are you sure? If you go there, he might show up." "If I hide, he wins the narrative." Sterling Enterprises occupied 2 floors of a sleek glass building overlooking the harbor. The reception area went uncomfortably quiet when she walked in. The whispers had clearly arrived before she did. Sarah went straight to the boardroom and asked her assistant to find Arthur Vance. Arthur walked in 10 minutes later. "Martha sent me the recording last night," he said without preamble. "A horrific business, but thank God she sent it." "Carter asked you about the company before the wedding." Arthur paused, sitting down heavily. "Yes, several times. He kept probing about your exact ownership percentage, who had signing authority on the escrow accounts, and the bylaws regarding replacing the board of directors. I dodged him. I need you to put that in the sworn affidavit for my lawyer." "Done. And there's something else. Yesterday morning, the day of the wedding, he called accounting and asked them to send a full list of liquid assets, saying it was for your new joint family financial planning. Sarah slowly set the folder down on the mahogany table. Did they send it? Of course not. Months ago, I instituted a strict lockdown on all financial disclosures, unless they bore your physical signature. In fact, I drafted a memo about it. I was waiting for you to get back from the honeymoon to authorize it. Send it out right now. Carter Preston has no ties to this company. He cannot access data signed contracts or negotiate on my behalf. By mid-afternoon, the counteroffensive was in full swing. Jessica Hayes' office served notice to the country club. Andrew Miller replied immediately. The security tapes were locked in the safe, and he would testify to seeing Carter and Chloe sneaking out of the service hallway. Dylan, the DJ, texted Emily, saying Carter's mother had already called him, demanding he sign a statement saying Sarah had the audio file prepared weeks in advance. He had hung up on her. Around 5 p.m., Carter showed up in the lobby of Sterling Enterprises. Security called the executive suite, reporting that Mr. Preston was demanding to see his wife. Sarah ordered security not to let him pass the turnstiles. A minute later, her cell phone rang. She hit the record button on her screen recording app and answered. Hello? Come down here, we need to talk. Communicate through my lawyer. Stop causing a scene. You are my wife. You keep repeating that because it's the only leverage you have left. You can run to all the expensive corporate lawyers you want, Sarah. But a marriage doesn't dissolve in 24 hours. He let out a short, dark laugh. So buckle up for months of this. I'm not going to let you annul anything. I'm not going to let you paint me as some gold-digging criminal. I'll demand marriage counseling. I'll demand forensic audits of the audio. I'll subpoena your friends. By the time I'm done, you'll be begging me for a quiet, amicable divorce settlement. Sarah looked through the glass walls of the boardroom. Outside stood Emily and Arthur Vance. Neither spoke, but their mere presence was enough to keep her from slipping back into the abyss of panic. If you didn't love me, Carter, why are you fighting so hard to stay married? Who said I didn't love you? That recording. You took a stressful argument out of context. I'll tell a judge a very different story. Are you sure about that? I'm sure you're exhausted, and you'll be even more exhausted when your mother begs you to stop dragging her name through the mud, and when your board members freak out over the PR nightmare. You want World War III? You got it. And remember, as long as I'm still legally your husband, I have the right to ask questions about our marital assets. Sarah hung up and immediately sent the screen recording to Jessica. Arthur walked into the room. That sounded like a threat. It was a confession of his legal strategy. He explicitly mentioned he's going to drag this out for months. Emily wrapped her arms around Sarah's shoulders. Sarah didn't cry. The conversation hadn't broken her. It had fortified her. Carter had just confirmed he wouldn't go quietly, which meant there would be no mercy. Late that night, back at Emily's apartment, the dining table was covered in printouts. A flash drive, her passport, the marriage certificate, and Jessica's legal strategy binder. It looked less like a post-wedding disaster and more like a war room. Her mother didn't call again. Chloe sent exactly one text. You destroyed our family. Sarah stared at the words for a long time, then took a screenshot and added it to the pile. Just before bed, an email arrived from Jessica Hayes. The subject line read, Draft Petition, Annulment. Sarah read the opening lines. There was no mention of a broken heart, a ruined dress, her mother's betrayal, or the humiliation. It was clinical. Dates, facts, legal codes, evidence of fraud. And yet, ironically, it was the cold, dry language of the law that finally gave her solid ground to stand on. At the bottom of the email, Jessica had added a brief note. Carter's attorney contacted my office, stated her client refuses to dissolve the marriage, and formally requested a private meeting without counsel. I declined. We file tomorrow morning. Sarah closed the laptop. The battlefield was set. Carter was determined not to repent, but to cling to her like a piece of real estate from which he hadn't yet squeezed all the value. 3 days after the wedding, Sarah saw her name in a forwarded screenshot and realized Carter was waging a two-front war, one in the legal system and one in the court of public opinion. He had sent the image to a massive WhatsApp group that mostly included Carter's family and friends. His mother, Linda, had written, "Just so everyone knows the truth, the bride had a psychotic break over baseless jealousy. She orchestrated a public humiliation of the Preston family and is now trying to dress up her cruelty as if she exposed the truth." When someone in the chat asked about the recording, Linda replied, "With AI and deepfakes nowadays, anyone can fake a voice. She planned it to destroy my son." Sarah read it without the burning sting of shame she would have felt a week earlier. Ever since Carter's threatening call, a heavy steel door had slammed shut inside her. The shock was locked behind it. Only the work remained. "Don't reply," Emily said over the phone. "Let Jessica watch them dig their own graves." "I'm not going to say a word." "Good, because I would have already burned it all down. That's why you're my best friend." At the Sterling Enterprises office, a framed notice now hung by the elevators. Carter Preston is not an authorized representative of Sarah Sterling or any affiliated entity. Arthur Vance walked into Sarah's office without knocking, holding a stack of accounting logs. "Last night, a man tried to socially engineer one of our junior payroll clerks over the phone. He wanted to know who approves wire transfers. The description matches Robert Preston Carter's father." Sarah took the log. "He probably introduced himself as a family friend, said his son is now the owner's husband, so he'd find out eventually anyway. Do they really think a piece of paper from City Hall overrides federal fraud laws?" "They're betting you'll get too tired to fight." Sarah slid the log into Jessica's increasingly thick folder. They're going to be waiting a long time. At noon, Martha Davis forwarded a text from Chloe. Her younger sister had written, "Tell Sarah that if this goes to a public trial, Mom's heart won't be able to handle the stress. Tell her to stop pretending she cares about this family." Sarah showed the phone to Emily. "She's using Mom as a human shield." "She's done it her whole life," Emily replied. "The only difference is that Mom used to volunteer for the job." That evening, Sarah drove to her mother's house. She needed to pick up her late father's personal files, copies of deeds, old letters, and notary documents related to the Sterling estate. Chloe opened the door. She wore no makeup and an oversized hoodie, but she didn't look broken. She looked venomous. "Coming to finish the job?" "I'm coming for your precious paperwork." "With you, it's always about the money, isn't it?" "Yes, even now." Sarah stepped into the foyer, forcing Chloe to back up. From the kitchen, Nancy's voice called out, "Chloe, who is it?" Nancy appeared and froze in the hallway, positioned exactly between her two daughters, as if the floorboards were a demilitarized zone. "Sarah, I packed Richard's files in boxes. They're in the study." "Thank you." Chloe latched the chain on the door, even though Sarah was already inside. "Afraid I'll run away?" Sarah asked. "Afraid you'll stage another dramatic performance," Chloe sneered. "You're so proud of your little recording. You act like you caught a serial killer." "I caught 2 parasites trying to bleed a marriage dry." "You caught a man who couldn't stand the sight of you. There's a difference." Nancy flinched. "Chloe, please stop." "Why stop? Let her hear it without a microphone. Carter suffocated next to you. He didn't come to my bed for money. He came to me to feel alive." Sarah looked at her sister with clinical detachment. Beneath Chloe's defiance lay something much darker than simple sibling rivalry. It was an ancient, festering resentment that no longer needed a disguise. Then why were you two strategizing over my voting shares and power of attorney? Because you hold everything hostage. Even when you don't deserve it, you always hold the winning hand. My hand or my father's? Mine. Nancy gripped the back of a dining chair. Chloe, no. Mom let her hear it. She got the rich dad, the Ivy League tuition, the penthouse, the spotless reputation. I got a loser who pawned your jewelry and passed out in his own vomit on the porch. You cried every night, Mom. And the next morning you'd tell Sarah she had to share, she had to yield, because her life was easier. So you decided to balance the cosmic scales by hijacking my wedding? Sarah asked. I decided to take what I was owed. It doesn't belong to you just because your feelings were hurt. Chloe took a step closer. You sound exactly like your arrogant father. Everything has to be by the rules. Everything has to look perfect. That's why you let him lie to your face for 3 years. You were so desperate for a handsome man to call you a good girl that you refused to see what was right in front of you. Sarah no longer searched her sister's face for any lingering trace of a bond. You don't love Carter. You just love the idea of beating me. He was nothing but a trophy to prove you could take something I cared about. Chloe raised her hand to slap her, but Nancy lunged forward and intercepted her wrist. Don't you even think about it. Chloe yanked her arm away. Oh, so now you're on her side? Nancy looked completely exhausted, but for the first time, she didn't look away. I am on the side of the truth. A little late for that. You made your choice, Mom. Don't pretend you suddenly found a moral compass just because you're embarrassed in front of your country club friends. Sarah walked into the study, picked up the 2 heavy archive boxes, and returned to the hallway. Her mother followed her. Sarah, wait. I have a meeting with my own lawyer tomorrow. I don't know how to fix this. Don't try to fix it now. Just don't get in my way. Nancy nodded, but Chloe laughed. Of course. The Queen has granted us permission to breathe. Sarah stopped at the door. Chloe, if you send one more threatening text to Emily, Martha, or my employees, I will hand it straight to Jessica Hayes and have a restraining order slapped on you. I am done protecting your fragile ego. Have I made myself clear? You think you're so righteous. You're just greedy. Sarah walked out without slamming the door. When she reached the driveway, her hands finally started to shake. She clutched the boxes tightly against her chest, listening to Chloe's muffled screams directed at her mother from inside the house. The next morning, Jessica officially filed the annulment petition. Carter was served, and in less than 24 hours, his lawyer filed a response. The document was written in dry legalese, but behind every paragraph, Sarah could feel the exact same arrogant smirk Carter wore when he whispered, "We signed the license." He vigorously denied any fraudulent intent. He claimed he had entered the marriage out of profound love. He classified the audio recording as an illegal, out-of-context snippet of an emotional crisis triggered by Chloe. He expressly requested the judge order a period of marriage counseling, arguing that a valid family unit had been formed, but was suffering a temporary crisis exacerbated by third-party interference. Sarah read the brief in Jessica's office. Every sentence felt like psychological assault, an attempt to erase her reality through manipulation. Even after the recording, he has the nerve to use the word family, Sarah said. It's a legal tactic, Jessica replied calmly. He has to present himself as the devoted husband, desperately trying to save the union. That automatically frames you as the erratic, unforgiving one. But he literally said his motive was my assets. Which is why we aren't going to rely on emotions. We're going to rely on a documented timeline of premeditation. The power of attorney draft, the inquiries to accounting, his interrogations of Arthur Vance, the threatening texts, his ambush in the lobby. Jessica slid another sheet of paper across the desk. And then there's this. Sarah read it. Carter had filed a discovery motion requesting a full audit of all properties, shares, and assets acquired by Sarah before and after the wedding date, claiming that, as her legal spouse, he had a legitimate interest in the fiscal health of the marital estate. "He's still digging for gold," Sarah whispered. "Exactly. And the judge will see that, even in the midst for his broken heart, his main concern is taking a peek at your portfolio." As they left Jessica's office, heading for the elevators, Sarah practically ran into Carter. He had arrived unannounced, wearing a tailored navy suit and holding a massive bouquet of white roses. The receptionist was trying to block him, explaining that meetings were strictly by appointment, but he had already spotted Sarah. "Sarah, wait." Jessica immediately stepped in front of her client. "Mr. Preston, all communications go through my office." Carter held up the roses, clearly performing for the invisible cameras in his mind, making sure the receptionist and passing paralegals saw him. "I came to see my wife. That's not a crime." "I won't speak to you without my lawyer present," Sarah said in a flat voice. "Sure. Now we communicate through billable hours." "Why are you here?" "To apologize. To tell you I'm willing to move past what you did." "What I did? You humiliated me in front of Boston's elite. Chloe manipulated me. I panicked, I said stupid things, but I'm willing to forgive you." "And the power of attorney?" Sarah asked with a lethal voice. He gripped the bouquet tighter. "I was trying to support you." "Same with the bank accounts. You don't understand corporate management as well as you think you do." That single sentence was a better confession than the audio file. Jessica pulled out her legal pad and noted the time. "Mr. Preston, this interaction is over. If you continue to harass my client, I will seek an immediate injunction." He leaned toward Sarah, ignoring the lawyer. "The judge is going to see a hysterical bride who ran at the first sign of conflict, and a husband willing to endure public humiliation to save his marriage. I'll be at every hearing. I'll file motion after motion. I'll demand depositions. You'll break before I do." "Thank you," Sarah said. He frowned. "For what?" "For proving I was right." She walked past him. The extravagant bouquet of roses remained in his hands, looking completely absurd. Following the lobby ambush, Jessica aggressively hardened her stance. She filed an affidavit regarding Carter's intimidation tactics at her office. Dylan, the DJ, signed a sworn statement verifying he received the audio file directly from the bride in the middle of the reception and witnessed her emotional state. Andrew Miller handed over the security camera footage, clearly showing Carter and Chloe leaving the restricted service area minutes before Sarah returned to the ballroom. Arthur Vance submitted a devastating affidavit detailing Carter's insistent inquiries about corporate governance cash flow and proxy voting rights. The accounting department provided the call log from his attempt to obtain the escrow account list. The net was closing. But that night brought a terrifying complication. Nancy called Sarah. It was the first time she had initiated contact since Sarah took the boxes. "Sarah, I had to call you." Her mother's voice was hoarse with panic. "What happened?" "Chloe left the house. She left a note saying I betrayed her. Carter isn't answering his phone." Sarah closed her eyes, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Is she with him?" "I don't know. I finally got through to him, and he told me he wasn't responsible for babysitting a grown woman." In that cold response, Sarah heard the definitive end of their alliance. The moment their plan collapsed, Chloe went from being Carter's accomplice to dead weight. "Mom, I'm not organizing a search party for her." "I know, I understand. It's just, I spent my whole life believing I was protecting the weaker daughter, and I ended up raising someone who refuses to take responsibility for anything." Sarah didn't say anything. It was the first time her mother had spoken that truth out loud. I found Richard's old letters. Nancy continued, her voice breaking. He wrote to you constantly after the divorce, but I didn't give them all to you. Sarah sat bolt upright. Why? Because I was grieving him. Because I felt like he was trying to buy your loyalty. Some envelopes have been in my attic for 15 years. I need to give them to you. Letters from the father who had shaped her worldview, withheld by a mother feeding her own insecurities. Another truth buried to avoid conflict. Bring them to Jessica Hayes' office tomorrow, Sarah said. Not to my house. I'm staying at Emily's. You don't trust me? No. Nancy didn't argue. All right, I'll bring them. 10 minutes later, Emily texted, Have you seen this? She attached a screenshot of Chloe's Instagram story. It read, My sister took everything I had, and now she's trying to destroy a man who only tried to love her. The real truth will come out soon. In the comments, Sarah saw a verified reply from Carter. He didn't defend his lover or deny the affair. He left a single, calculated sentence. I have kindly asked to be kept out of this family drama. I remain fully committed to saving my marriage with my wife. Chloe was no longer useful to him. Carter was publicly discarding her to maintain his facade for the judge. He was willing to throw his accomplice under the bus if it meant keeping control of Sarah's assets. Early the next morning, Jessica called. We have a date. The preliminary hearing is set, but there's a problem. Carter filed a motion to suppress the audio recording and requested a forensic tech expert evaluate your phone. He also filed an affidavit claiming that before the wedding, you specifically asked him to take over the family finances. I never said that, which means he's either falsifying emails or he bought a witness. Sarah walked over to Emily's dining table. Resting on top of her legal pile was the marriage certificate. The thick, embossed paper looked so fragile, and yet Carter was using it as a weapon of mass destruction. Just then, an email notification popped up on Sarah's laptop. The sender was a heavily encrypted Proton Mail address. The body of the email contained a single sentence. Look at what your husband was planning a month before the wedding. There was an Excel file attached. Sarah didn't open it. Following protocol, she forwarded it to Jessica, called Emily into the room, and only then looked back at the screen. The attachment was titled Post-Wedding Timeline.xlsx. She didn't open the actual file until she was sitting in Jessica's office. The lawyer refused to let her click on it on her personal device. First, Jessica ran it in a sandbox environment on a separate computer, saved the metadata, and printed the routing headers. Emily sat next to Sarah, staring at the monitor as if a ghost were about to jump out of it. The spreadsheet was deceptively simple. Columns for dates, bullet points, names, and status updates. But every cell reeked of a predator's calculation. Week 1. Secure. General power of attorney. Mom. Use the trust approach. Week 2. Chloe. Maintain absolute silence until papers are signed. Week 3. Arthur Vance. Placate him. Dodge him later if he blocks board access. Month 3. Home equity loan on townhouse. Get appraisal through dad's contacts. Year 1. Prep amicable divorce. Use alimony as leverage. Sarah read it line by line. The visceral panic that had choked her on her wedding night was gone. It had been replaced by a dense, icy rage. He categorized us like we were corporate acquisitions, she said. Jessica slid the printed sheet into a plastic sleeve. This is explosive, but it's not strictly evidence yet. We have to verify the IP address, the metadata author, and tie it definitively to Carter's devices. If we submit an anonymous spreadsheet received via email to the court, Opposing counsel will shred it as a fabrication. Chloe sent it, Emily said quietly. Sarah looked up. That's why we wait, Jessica concluded. We already have the recording, the power of attorney draft, the aggressive texts, the club footage, Arthur Vance's affidavit, and the accounting logs. This spreadsheet is our nuclear option if we can authenticate it. That afternoon, Nancy arrived at the law office with a wrapped bundle of Richard Sterling's letters. She didn't ask to go into the conference room. She stood awkwardly in the reception area. I hid them from you when you were a teenager, Nancy said when Sarah came out to meet her. I thought he was trying to buy your affection from the grave. Sarah took the heavy bundle of history, but she didn't untie the string. I didn't ask you to come here to judge the past, Mom. I need to know whose side you're on today. Nancy nodded, her eyes red. I'm willing to testify under oath about my conversation with Carter. He came to see me and explicitly instructed me on how to pressure you into signing away your financial rights. I thought it was just old-fashioned marital restructuring. I was wrong. Do you realize Chloe will see that as the ultimate betrayal? She already does. Nancy spoke without her usual defensive posture. Her face was marked by deep shame, but Sarah still didn't know how to accept it as genuine remorse. The first hearing took place a week later, at the downtown family court. Sarah arrived escorted by Jessica and Emily. Though Emily had to wait in the hallway, Carter was already there by the tall windows. He wore a conservative charcoal gray suit and held a leather binder. His face was a masterpiece of solemn, wounded dignity. Beside him stood his lawyer, a sharp-featured woman in a silk blouse and a gold chain. Linda and Robert Preston sat on the benches nearby. Chloe was nowhere to be seen. Carter took a step toward Sarah. It's not too late to stop this circus. Let your lawyer talk to mine. I just want to talk to my wife. You don't have a wife. He offered a tight, patronizing smile. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts disagrees. Jessica stepped between them. Mr. Preston, director comments to me. Wonderful, he scoffed. Let the judge see exactly who is obstructing a reconciliation. The bailiff called them into the courtroom. The judge, an older woman with zero tolerance for nonsense, verified their appearances, outlined the petition for annulment based on fraud, and sternly warned both parties that she would not turn her courtroom into a reality TV reunion. Jessica immediately moved to admit the evidence, the audio file, the text messages, the power of attorney draft, the country club security footage, and the sworn affidavits from Dylan Andrew Miller, Arthur Vance, and the accounting department. Carter's lawyer objected to practically everything. The audio was obtained without two-party consent, a gray area given the expectation of privacy in a service hallway. The text messages were written under extreme emotional duress. The power of attorney draft was standard marital estate planning. The video lacked audio context. Then Carter stood up. Your Honor, I am not giving up on my marriage. I deeply love Sarah. I respectfully request that the court grant us a mandatory reconciliation period. My wife is acting under the heavy, undue influence of her friends and corporate advisors. Sarah felt a surge of bile. He spoke of love with the exact same cadence he had used to demand she delete the recording at 3 a.m. Jessica countered smoothly. Your Honor, the petitioner is not seeking a divorce, but an annulment based on fraudulent inducement. The respondent entered the marriage with the explicit, documented intention of exploiting the petitioner's financial assets with no good faith intent to fulfill the marital covenant. A reconciliation period is nothing more than a stalling tactic to allow the respondent to maintain continued legal access to the petitioner's estate. The judge denied the immediate request for a reconciliation period, but, to Carter's visible, arrogant satisfaction, ordered an independent forensic evaluation of the audio file. to rule out tampering. Carter had secured his first delay. Leaving the courtroom, he leaned toward Sarah as she walked past the oak tables. "I told you this was a marathon, not a sprint. As long as I'm still your husband, you'll have to deal with me." She didn't flinch. Jessica aggressively jotted down the interaction. Over the next week, Carter's lawyer buried them in paperwork. They subpoenaed half the wedding guest list. They demanded a second review of the country club footage. They filed aggressive motions to unseal Sarah's premarital trust documents. Every brief referred to Carter as a devoted husband fighting to save his family. "He clings to the vocabulary," Emily noted one night as they reviewed documents, "as if calling it a family magically makes him an honest man." "It's a war of attrition," Jessica explained over speakerphone. "The longer he holds on to the legal title of husband, the more pressure he puts on your mother, your board of directors, and the press. He wants you to settle." A month passed. The forensic expert's report came back. The audio file was authentic. No deepfakes, no spliced audio, no signs of tampering. The voices were a 100% match. For Sarah, that piece of paper was the first nail in his defense's coffin. During the second hearing, Carter changed his strategy. He dropped the devoted husband act and leaned into playing the victim of circumstance. He claimed the hallway conversation was an explosive argument where Chloe had cornered him, and that he was just saying whatever it took to calm her down so he could get back to his bride. Jessica cross-examined him with surgical precision. "Mr. Preston, if you were merely trying to pacify a jealous ex, why did you demand my client delete the recording immediately after the wedding?" "It was embarrassing for my family." "Why did you text her, 'I am your husband'?" "The court will hear that too, because it is a legal fact." "Why did you attempt to request the balances of the company's escrow accounts on the morning of your wedding?" A husband has a fiduciary duty to understand the family's financial standing. By the end of his testimony, Carter was stiff and quiet. The judge was taking meticulous notes. Dylan testified next. Despite his nerves, he stood his ground. The bride handed him the phone directly. He plugged it in. There was no time for cinematic-level audio manipulation. Andrew Miller testified about the security footage placing Carter and Chloe together in the hallway at the exact time of the recording. Arthur Vance took the stand and systematically dismantled the attentive husband narrative. He detailed Carter's aggressive questions about corporate bylaws. Carter's lawyer tried to spin it. "Isn't it normal for a new husband to want to ease his wife's administrative burdens? Men who want to help ask about workload," Arthur replied dryly. "Men who want to steal ask about voting shares." A silence fell over the courtroom. After a recess, Nancy was called to testify. Sarah dreaded this more than Carter's lies. Her mother had a lifelong habit of retreating into self-pity or protecting Chloe at all costs. But Nancy took the stand, gripped the edges, and spoke clearly. "A week before the wedding, Carter Preston came to my house. He told me Sarah was too paranoid to trust him with the estate, and that my job as a mother was to convince her to hand over a power of attorney. I thought he was trying to build a modern marriage. I now understand I was being groomed as an accomplice to extortion." Carter's lawyer went on the attack. "Mrs. Sterling, aren't you simply testifying against your son-in-law to win back the favor of your wealthy daughter after a family falling out?" Nancy paled, but her voice didn't waver. "I spent my life making excuses for my youngest daughter. Today, I am not making excuses. I am done lying." Sarah looked down at her hands. It didn't erase decades of favoritism, but for the first time, her mother had refused to hide behind Chloe's trauma. When the hearing ended, Carter caused a scene on the courthouse steps. He pulled out his phone and started recording himself as he walked towards Sarah. I came here to fight for my wife, and a cabal of corporate lawyers is tearing my family away from me. Sarah stopped looking directly into the camera lens. You conspired with my sister to defraud me and steal my father's estate. The court has the receipts. Post that. He lowered the phone instantly. You think you've won. I think you're terrified of the discovery process. That night, Sarah's phone rang. It was Chloe. Are you happy? Chloe spat. Mom testified against me. Mom testified to the facts. You always knew how to steal people from me. I haven't stolen anyone. Carter acts like I don't even exist anymore. Chloe's voice trembled with a raw, unhinged fury. He's posting online that he wants to save his marriage to you. He's trying to save his bank account, Sarah said. He'd sell out anyone to save his own skin. He'd sell you out, and I have proof. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. What proof? His texts, his voice memos, the game plan, the power of attorney strategies, the condo appraisal, the timeline to drag out the annulment until you ran out of energy and agreed to a divorce payout. Chloe let out a bitter, broken laugh. Tell Jessica Hayes to check her inbox. You're doing this to get back at him, not to help me. What does it matter if it destroys him? It matters in a courtroom. I need the original files. Chloe went silent. I'll bring them tomorrow. Don't think this makes us sisters again. I don't. The line went dead. Sarah immediately called Jessica, who warned her not to meet Chloe alone and ordered her to make the drop-off at the office. But the next morning, Chloe never showed up. Her phone went straight to voicemail. At noon, Nancy called in a panic. Chloe is missing. She didn't come home last night. Carter called me from 3 different numbers, demanding to know where she was. I heard him yelling at her on the phone yesterday that she was going to court. Sarah stood up. Have you asked her friends? No one has seen her, Sarah. I'm scared. Jessica took Sarah's phone, pulled a timeline, possible locations, and instructed Nancy to file a missing persons report with the Boston police immediately. Technically, Chloe was an adult who could disappear of her own free will, but given the ongoing litigation and the threat against a key witness, it elevated the level of gravity. An hour later, Carter's lawyer filed an emergency motion to delay the next hearing due to a medical emergency. She attached a vague note from a private concierge clinic. At the same time, they filed a bizarre affidavit claiming Chloe had been extorting Carter for money and threatening to commit perjury. Jessica read it out loud. He's scorching the earth. If she shows up, he frames her as a blackmailer. If she stays gone, he plays the innocent victim. Sarah stared at the signature at the bottom of the affidavit. The same hand that had written, "For my beautiful bride," on a card, was now systematically trying to erase anyone who stood in his way. He's not going to stop, Sarah said. That's why we're going to crush him. That night, Sarah finally untied the bundle of her father's letters. Richard's handwriting was firm and slanted. She opened the first envelope, the paper yellowing at the edges. Maddie, using her childhood nickname. If a man ever demands your blind trust as proof of his love, do not hand him the keys to your life. Love never fears boundaries. Greed is always in a hurry. She held the letter in her lap while the city lights flickered outside Emily's window. Her phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. If you want to see Chloe alive and out of a psych ward, drop the lawsuit. You can't destroy a man's life without consequences. Sarah read the message once. She took a screenshot and sent it to Jessica. The lawyer's reply was instantaneous. Do not leave the apartment. I'm on my way. This just went from a civil matter to a felony. Jessica arrived 40 minutes later. For the first time, Sarah saw the unflappable lawyer genuinely angry. Nancy was already sitting at Emily's kitchen island, clutching her phone to her chest. She had rushed over because she couldn't bear to be alone in her empty house. "Show me the exact text," Jessica demanded. Sarah handed her the phone. "If you want to see Chloe alive and out of a psych ward, drop the lawsuit. You can't destroy a man's life without consequences." Nancy gasped, covering her mouth. "It's Carter." "We're not going to guess. We're going to establish a paper trail," Jessica said sharply. She photographed the screen, logged the timestamp, and had Emily back it up. Then she called a contact at the precinct, explaining that a key witness in a high-stakes civil fraud case was missing, and the plaintiff was receiving extortion texts. "This is my fault," Nancy cried. "I let him into this family." "The only one at fault is the man sending the threats," Jessica snapped. "Save the guilt for therapy. We have work to do." By midnight, the police tracked the last known ping from Chloe's cell tower to a cheap motel off Interstate 95. Nancy and Emily rode with the detectives. Sarah stayed behind with Jessica. An hour later, Emily initiated a video call. "We found her," Emily said, flipping the camera. Chloe was sitting on a motel bed, wrapped in a cheap blanket. A dark, ugly bruise in the shape of fingers wrapped around her left wrist. Nancy hovered over her, terrified. "What happened?" Sarah asked through the screen. Chloe refused to look at the camera. "Carter was waiting by my car yesterday. He told me I was mentally unstable and that if I took the text to your lawyer, his dad had a doctor friend who would have me involuntarily committed for a breakdown. His dad showed up in an SUV. They tried to force me in so I'd be put to sleep until the trial was over. I managed to run to a gas station and hid in the bathroom. I dropped my phone. It shattered." "Who sent me the text?" Sarah asked. "I don't know, probably his dad, but Carter said those exact words to me." Jessica leaned toward the screen. "Chloe, do you still have the files?" "Yes." Chloe pulled her designer bag onto her lap. "The flash drive is sewn into the lining. I'm not as stupid as he thought." The next morning, they gathered in Jessica's boardroom. Chloe wore oversized sunglasses and a silk scarf despite the indoor heating. She offered no apologies, nor did she get swept up in tearful reconciliations. She simply tossed the silver flash drive onto the mahogany table. 3 years of texts. I saved the important ones in a hidden folder. "Why?" Jessica asked. Chloe flashed a dark, twisted smile. "Because you don't blindly trust a man who is actively planning a wedding with someone else." The flash drive was a gold mine. Carter's text to Chloe laid out the entire conspiracy. "After we sign the license, she'll soften up. Her mom will help." Another text read, "The marriage isn't the goal. The power of attorney is. Without the board seats, none of this matters." And then there were the voice memos. In one, Carter sounded exhausted with the hum of the highway in the background. "If she files for the annulment, we drag it out. We demand counseling. We demand psych evals. We use the word family until the judge gets sick of hearing it. The process takes months. We can break anyone in months." Chloe sat motionless while her own complicity played out on the audio. Nancy stared at the table. "Did you know how far this went?" Nancy asked her youngest daughter. "I knew parts. He designed the corporate stuff. And yet you went along with it." Chloe stood up aggressively. "Don't start with me. You spent my whole life telling me how easy Sarah had it. I just learned the lesson too well." "No," Nancy said firmly. "I pitied you, and that was my mistake. But the malice, you chose that, all on your own." The room fell silent. Chloe seemed to brace herself for her mother to back down, to offer her usual blanket of protection. But Nancy didn't move. Jessica logged the flash drive into evidence, submitting it under a voluntary disclosure agreement. The lawyer immediately filed an amended petition and notified the judge of the witness tampering. At the final hearing, Carter's lawyer attempted one last desperate maneuver, presenting a doctor's note claiming Carter was suffering from a severe panic attack. The judge, aware of the police report involving Chloe, denied the continuance. 20 minutes later, Carter walked through the double doors. He looked pale, cornered, and stripped of his usual arrogant veneer. Chloe was called to the stand first. She walked to the witness box as if stepping on shattered glass. Sarah felt no warmth toward her, but the burning hatred had burned itself out. "I engaged in a sexual relationship with Carter Preston for 3 years," Chloe testified under oath. "It continued until the morning of the wedding. He never had any intention of ending it after marrying Sarah." Carter jumped out of his seat. "She's lying. She's out for revenge." The judge banged her gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Preston." Chloe continued. "We had a strategy. He explicitly stated that Sarah was gullible and that our mother could be manipulated into pressuring her. The goal was the power of attorney, leveraging her townhouse and a lucrative divorce settlement. When the audio leaked, his strategy shifted to playing the heartbroken husband, just to legally delay the annulment." Carter's lawyer tried to paint Chloe as a spiteful, unstable lover. "Isn't it true you are just a vindictive ex trying to ruin his life?" "I am vindictive. I am angry. But I didn't deepfake his voice memos with AI, and I didn't write his text messages." Jessica played the new audio files in open court. Carter's own voice echoed off the wood-paneled walls, talking about how to exploit Sarah's proper upbringing and how to use his father to get a backdoor real estate appraisal. Robert Preston turned purple. Linda stared at the floor. When Nancy took the stand, she dodged nothing. She recounted the manipulative conversation, the pressure campaign, and her own profound failure to see the truth. When Carter's lawyer asked her why she had suddenly turned against her favorite daughter, Nancy looked at the judge. "Because I finally stopped confusing love with covering up a crime." Sarah closed her eyes. It didn't fix the past, but for the first time, her mother had chosen reality. Carter was the last to testify. He denied everything. He claimed the texts were taken out of context, that Chloe was a pathological liar, that Nancy had been brainwashed by Sarah's wealth, and that his bride was simply punishing him for a moment of masculine weakness. "I didn't want her money," he pleaded. "I wanted to be her husband. I still object to dissolving this marriage." Jessica stood up. "If you didn't want her money, why did you text Chloe that without board seats the marriage was useless?" "It was a joke." No one in the courtroom laughed. After hours of grueling testimony, the judge retired to deliberate. Sarah sat in the hallway next to Emily. Martha Davis paced the corridor, muttering that people like the Prestons belonged in federal prison. Chloe stood alone by the far window. Nancy walked over to her slowly. "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" "I'll manage. If you want to start over, I'll help you. If you ever lie to me again, my door stays closed forever." Chloe looked at her mother with deep resentment. "You chose Sarah." "I chose the truth. Late, but I chose it." The bailiff called them back into the courtroom. The judge's ruling was delivered in dry, clinical legal terminology, but to Sarah, it was a symphony. The court finds clear and convincing evidence that the respondent, Carter Preston, entered the marital contract through gross, fraudulent inducement. The respondent actively concealed a long-standing relationship with the petitioner's sister. He conspired to misappropriate the petitioner's financial assets and had no good faith intent to establish a marital union. His subsequent requests for reconciliation are deemed frivolous, vexatious, and an abuse of the legal process. Sarah held her breath. Therefore, the petition for annulment is granted. The marriage is declared void ab initio, as if it never existed. All legal rights and privileges previously afforded to the respondent are terminated immediately. Sarah exhaled for the first time in 2 months. Her lungs filled completely. Carter's face went blank, then instantly morphed into pure rage. "This isn't over. I'm filing an appeal." Jessica calmly snapped her briefcase shut. "That is your right." "You didn't win anything," Carter spat at Sarah. "I won my name back." Chloe was the first to leave the courtroom. Carter caught up to her at the top of the marble stairs. "Happy now? You dragged me down with you." "You were the one who told me to keep the receipts," Chloe fired back. "Now you have nothing, and you're a pariah. I was the only one who could stand you." He raised his hand aggressively, but a court officer immediately stepped forward, resting a hand on his belt. Carter lowered his arm and stormed out through the glass doors. His parents followed him, his mother crying over their ruined reputation, his father completely silent, knowing his son's extortion attempts were now part of the public record. Sarah didn't go out to celebrate. She went straight to the executive floor of Sterling Enterprises. Arthur Vance had gathered the core management team in the boardroom. Without getting into tabloid details, Sarah informed them that the legal battle was definitively over. The threats had been neutralized, and the company was secure. "And one more thing," Sarah said, standing at the head of the table. "I am no longer going to hide behind the idea that this is just my father's legacy. It is my responsibility now. I am taking the reins." The executives remained silent for a moment. Then Arthur Vance started clapping. Soon the entire room joined in the kind of applause reserved for someone who took a devastating hit and refused to stay on the mat. A week later, Carter's lawyer filed an appeal, but it was a desperate rehash of the old arguments. He was clinging to the judicial system because he had no leverage left. The appellate judge dismissed it in a matter of days. Shortly after, Chloe packed up her car and moved out of state to live with a distant aunt. Before leaving, she sent Sarah one last text. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to know I'll stay out of your life forever." Sarah didn't reply. Sometimes, silence is much more honest than a perfectly crafted sentence. Nancy visited her rarely at first. She would call days in advance, cautiously asking if it was a good time. Sarah spent her evenings reading the rest of her father's letters. "A person's true strength doesn't lie in their bank account," Richard had written, "but in their capacity to defend their boundaries against the greed of others." One afternoon, Nancy arrived with a small shoebox and a sticky note. "This is absolutely the last of it. There is nothing else." Sarah took the box of old photographs. "Why did you really hide them?" Her mother sat heavily on a bar stool. "I was jealous of him. Jealous that he could give you a life I couldn't. Instead of being happy for you, I punished you by making him absent. And then I smothered Chloe with pity, as if your pain was somehow the price of her happiness. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know. I'm not asking for instant forgiveness." Sarah looked at her mother. The woman sitting across from her was no longer the matriarch who demanded submission to keep the peace, but a flawed person who had finally faced her own complicity. "Come in," Sarah said quietly, but no excuses for Chloe. Nancy started to cry silently. "Thank you." 3 months later, on the ground floor of a beautifully renovated historic brownstone in the South End, Sterling Enterprises opened its new flagship coffee roastery. Emily arrived before anyone else, loudly directing the delivery guys on where to place the floral arrangements. Martha Davis aggressively argued with the pastry chef about the exact circumference of the lemon tarts. Arthur Vance stood in a corner chatting with a local bean supplier. Nancy arrived last. She lingered by the glass entrance doors, hesitating before fully stepping into the bustling room. Sarah walked over to her. "Want some coffee?" Her mother nodded, a fragile smile forming on her face. I'd love some. They didn't hug. It was still too soon for that. But Nancy took a seat by the large front window, and Sarah set a ceramic mug and a slice of lemon pound cake in front of her. The gesture carried no trace of the old, guilty daughter. It was just a cautious beginning. That night, after the opening party ended and the guests cleared out, Sarah stepped out onto the sidewalk. The streets of Boston were full of noise. Neon signs reflected off the rain-slicked pavement. The air smelled of roasted espresso and freedom. She felt a deep, anchored exhaustion, the kind born of honest work untainted by fear. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. It was an unknown number, but the cadence of the text gave him away instantly. Do you really think a court order changes what we had? We could start over. I've realized a lot of things. Sarah read the message without a single tremor in her pulse. She took a screenshot for Jessica, blocked the number, and permanently deleted the thread. Emily walked out of the coffee shop, locking the door behind her. Was that him again? Not anymore, Emily smiled. Come on, Martha is demanding we take the leftover cake to my place. Sarah let out a bright light laugh, completely free of pain. She looked back at the glowing windows of the roastery. Inside was the legacy her father had built, protected, not by a legal seal, but by her own iron will. She had walked away from the traitors and reclaimed herself. And those who had come to steal her future were left outside, standing before a locked door she would never, ever open again.